Welcome to our third session on the rules of squash, where we deal with the final 5 rules, beginning with rule 11 on the ball. And the first thing we're told is that if both players request it, the ball can be replaced. Sometimes then one of the two players is unsatisfied with the ball, and if the referee agrees with that, well then again the ball can be replaced. Then when a ball breaks during a rally, a let is played and the rally is replayed. The ball should be warmed up to playing conditions after breaking or after the other intervals, for example, like the intervals between games, or maybe after an injury break. The ball should be brought back to playing condition. Sometimes it happens that the server feels the ball is broken before they serve. In that event, the odds are the ball was broken in the previous rally, and a let should be played on that. By the same token, maybe the server serves the ball and it's the opinion of the referee that in fact that ball was broken before it hit the front wall on the serve, in which case again a let can be played on the previous rally. The ball remains on court at all times, and I've never seen a ball wedging, but a wedge refers there to where the ball will stick between the side and front wall. I suppose such a thing is possible. I've just never seen it nor heard of it. And if the ball touches an article on the floor, a let will be allowed. Unless, as we'll see later, that article happened to fall from maybe a sweatband or something like that fell from a player, in which case the player will lose the rally. And no let for unusual bounces. That's just looked on as the luck of the draw. Top right here we see it is a Dunlop double yellow dot, which in the context of Irish squash is the recommended ball for tournaments. And down here the single dot, sometimes used for slower courts or sometimes used by beginning players. And of course you'll be aware that for children there are different sized balls giving longer hang times. Rule 12 deals with distraction, and I've given a graphic for typical examples where you've got a bee or something coming onto the court, or maybe there's a lot of noise going on from an appreciative audience, or maybe there's an unexpected sneeze, or maybe unexpected applause or something like that. Well, distraction is something that will happen which will cause one of the players to feel that it's affected their ability to play the shot, and it's important that if they want a let for distraction, the appeal must be immediate. You can't wait until the end of the rally and then say, referee, that mobile phone went off in the balcony during the rally, it distracted me and I would like a let now. No, if you want a let, you must call for a let immediately. If the distraction is caused accidentally by the opponent, let's say the opponent falls over or something like that, or drops their racket, and if it is a distraction for the player and the player appeals immediately again for that a let would be allowed. Of course, if the distraction is caused by the intentional action of the opponent, then there would be no let, or there would be a stroke awarded against that opponent under Rule 15 for undesirable conduct. If the distraction isn't caused by the opponent, let is allowed. Now, they've changed the interpretation of the distraction rule in that to promote maybe a more exciting environment, it's no longer appropriate for the referee to ask a crowd to be silent. And in any event, very often there's passing noise, pedestrian or traffic, especially if the match is played outdoors or in some situation like that. So Rule 12.3 would be waived. Still, though, even in a noisy environment, if the noise was loud enough and if it was unexpected, a let could be allowed for distraction. That would be up to the referee. We'll see that particular match there being in Grand Central Station, where you can imagine there will be considerable noise from passing traffic. Rule 13 deals with objects falling onto the court. There's no automatic let for a fallen racket unless that racket is causing interference. It could happen that an opponent will drop their racket, maybe perspiration on their hands or something like that, and the mere fact that the racket falls to the court is known. It doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a let. However, things like maybe the sweatband falling off, or maybe if they're carrying a handkerchief or something like that, or maybe if a string tensioner is falls from their racket onto the floor, those are objects falling from the player or their equipment, in which case the referee should stop the rally and award the point to the opponent. Objects falling from outside of the court, then it could happen that maybe if you have somebody on the balcony, they could drop a pen or a biro or a marking sheet or something like that onto the court, and the referee should stop the rally immediately and play a let. However, sometimes it goes unnoticed, in which case the rally should continue to its conclusion and it has no effect. That's me dropping my score sheet or maybe a pen. Rule 14 deals with illness. Rule 14 deals with illness and injury and blood. Rule 14.1 deals with illness. Players suffering from illness, in other words, they're unwell. This is not injury now or bleeding. So illness such as cramping up or feeling sick, nauseous, or feeling breathless or dizzy. Well, play must be continuous, and the player needs to concede the game in progress and take the 90-second interval between games. And this can happen only once. Often people feel that this is a very severe or draconian rule, and they'll say that somebody's health is more important than a game of squash, and why can't they be allowed to recover sufficiently before they play on? But these rules are designed, the rules of squash are designed for competitive squash. And given that it is a competition, if somebody's health is affecting their ability to continue, of course their health trumps the result of a match. And of course they should stop playing because their health is more important. But in the event that they want to continue with the match, well then this rule applies. You take your 90 seconds interval and you continue after that. If you're not able to continue, you must concede the match. If the player's illness causes the court to be unplayable, then the match must be awarded to the opponent. This would be the case of somebody maybe vomiting on the court or something of that nature, and that makes the court unplayable, and unfortunately the match must be awarded to their opponent. Rule 14.2 deals with injury, and the idea here is that firstly the referee must satisfy themselves that there is in fact injury. If they're not satisfied that there's an injury, they can proceed as if it were illness and allow the player to continue to play or concede the current match, taking the current game, taking the 90 seconds interval. But assuming that there is injury and that the injury is genuine, then the referee must decide which type of injury applies. So, for example, if the referee thinks it's a self-inflicted injury, the referee must immediately say that and explain that there's 3 minutes allowed. Now, it's worth noting that if the player comes on the court with an existing injury, or if at that time, when they're looking for a break for injury, if it's in a pre-existing injury, it's treated as illness, and the illness rule applies of play being continuous or conceding the game and taking the 90 seconds break. So, okay, we eventually get to actual injury. Self-inflicted injury, that would be where the player goes over on their ankle or maybe collides with a wall or something like that. The player is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes. And when the 3 minutes elapses, if the player is unable to continue, they can concede the game, take the 90-second break, and then resume for the next game. The next type of injury is a contributed injury, where the injury is a result of the action of the two players. Accidental action. In which case, the injured player has 15 minutes to recover, and if that's not sufficient, a further 15 minutes is allowed, but unfortunately no longer than that. If they're unable to continue after the second 15 minutes, the match is awarded to the opponent. Now, sometimes, of course, the player is playing on a team event, and whatever score they have accumulated up to the time the match is awarded against them, or up to the time the match is awarded to the opponent, they retain those scores. That can be important in a comeback situation in a team event. And then we get to 14.3, which deals with opponent-inflicted injury, the first one being accidentally caused by the opponent. So, for example, that would be a situation where maybe the player runs into the opponent, or the opponent runs into the player accidentally, or maybe follows through with the swing, or maybe on the backhand, follow through, maybe catches their opponent accidentally, and 15 minutes is allowed to recover, and if the player is unable to recover after 15 minutes, the match is awarded to the player. And then if it's intentionally, deliberately, if it's an injury deliberately inflicted by the opponent, or if it's dangerous play on the part of the opponent, and if any recovery time is required, the match must be awarded to the player and Rule 15 imposed. The general idea here is that you mustn't reward dangerous play or any deliberate action that injures your opponent, so that has to be penalised to the highest extent. The blood rule, or bleeding, that has changed, and I'm not going to refer to what it was previously, just to deal with what it is currently, because that's a sufficient challenge. A blood injury is defined as where bleeding occurs and the bleeding is sufficient, the flow of the blood is sufficient that the blood could transfer to the other player or it could drop to the floor. So in other words, there must be a flow of blood. And a graze on your knee, or maybe scrape on the hand or something that doesn't result in a blood flow, will not be looked on as something that is looked on as a blood injury. Similarly, if merely seeing blood through a bandage doesn't constitute bleeding. So, once a blood injury does actually occur, the player must leave the court, and it's the referee's responsibility to ensure that the injured player returns to the court in the shortest possible time according to the following rules. So, there's Jack Allen checking to make sure that it's a blood injury with Jonathan Power. And let's look at the different types of blood injuries. There's self-inflicted. This may be now it's where you fall to the ground or you bang against the wall. It doesn't involve the other player, and there's blood flow. You've got also just developing a nosebleed. You've got 5 minutes to stop the blood flow and to cover the bleeding. And if you can't resume after 5 minutes, you concede the game. Take your 90-second interval and continue. So you'll see that's very similar to self-inflicted injury, but for the longer time allowed, 5 minutes instead of 3. Now, if that blood injury recurs, you have to concede the game in progress and take your 90-second interval. If the same blood injury recurs because of, the action of both parties. So, for example, I've had a blood injury which I've stopped within the 5 minutes limit, or eventually, and I'm playing on, and then I come into collision with my opponent. That's now caused by us both, and then I'll have reasonable time to stem the blood flow. There's no time specified here. It will be down to the referee to decide, and also the tournament schedule. If the injured player can't resume play within the permitted time, whatever that is, the referee will award the match to the opponent. So there's quite a lot there on the self-inflicted injury, the self-inflicted blood injury. Contributed. That's where the blood injury is caused by both players' actions. You've got an unspecified reasonable time to stem the blood flow and to cover the bleeding. And if it recurs through no fault of either player, you'll have further reasonable time. But if it happens solely because of the actions of the injured player, so my blood injury recurs, but I run into the wall or I fall, and my blood injury recurs, I have no further recovery time. I concede the game in progress and take the 90-second interval and hopefully continue after that. If you can't resume play within reasonable time, the referee will award the match to the opponent. And then opponent inflicted, where the blood injury is caused solely by the opponent. Accidental first. Reasonable time, again it's unspecified, reasonable time to stem the flow of blood and to cover the wound. If the player can't resume after that, the match is of course awarded to the player because the bleeding was as a result of the action of their opponent, albeit accidental. If they've stemmed the blood flow but it recurs through no fault of either player, there's reasonable time allowed. But if they can't stem it within that reasonable time, the match is awarded to the player. Remember now, it's awarded to the player because the injury in the first instance was inflicted by the opponent. So the player will get the match. But if the blood injury recurs as a result of the action of the injured player, no further time allowed, concede the game in progress, take your 90 seconds, and if then you can't resume, the match will be awarded to the opponent. So you see a situation here where the bleeding was caused by the opponent's accidental action, but we've ended up with the opponent being awarded the match because the bleeding has recurred through the action of the injured player themselves. All very complicated, requires a lot of reading and consideration. Of course, where the blood injury has been caused by the opponent's deliberate, dangerous play, well, of course, the match will be awarded to the player, as is the case with an opponent-inflicted injury that doesn't involve blood, and it's all under Rule 15. So a lot to be read up on there in relation to Rule 14. Finishing it off then in relation to the blood, if there is a stoppage, the court must be cleaned and blood-stained clothing replaced. And then finishing off on injury in general, an injured player may resume play before the end of the permitted time. That happens occasionally. And both players must be given reasonable time to prepare to resume. And finally, it's always the injured player's decision whether or not to resume play. It's not the decision of the referee or the official. It's always the injured player's decision whether or not to resume play. Rule 15, our old friend, conduct on court. It's the last rule and also needs a bit of reading. There we have it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in relation to conduct. Players must comply with any tournament regulations additional to these rules. Sometimes there are regulations relating to how long a player has to turn up for the match after the scheduled time, because the rules of squash say that it all depends on the rules of the tournament. Squash rules don't say 10 minutes or 15 minutes. The rules of squash say that the player must be on time, depending on the tournament regulations. Players may not place any object within the court, so that you can't bring in your towel and put it up under the tin. Yes, in the professional game they've got boxes for that now, but the towel is in the box and isn't interfering with play, or couldn't potentially interfere with play. So don't bring, if you're refereeing a match and the player brings their wallet or their mobile phone or their towel and they want to place it safely out of the way up at the tin, well, Rule 15.2, players may not place any object within the court. Players may not leave the court during a game without the permission of the referee. I recall the final of the Irish Open a number of years back, where on match ball, the receiver of the serve ran off the court to change a racket because the string had broken, and the referee awarded the conduct stroke against that player, resulting in that player losing the final. Players may not request a change of any official. Some players have a notion that if they get their opponent's agreement, they can change the referee or the marker, and that isn't the case. 15.5 is a catch-all. It's basically saying that the referee has a lot of discretion because players must not behave in a manner that's unfair, dangerous, abusive, offensive, or in any way detrimental to the sport. That's a very subjective rule, and it will be down to the referee to interpret it. 15.6 is really interesting because the rule goes on to describe 10 types of behaviour that are unacceptable. And it says, if a player's conduct is unacceptable, the referee must penalise the player. Must penalise the player. Now, it doesn't say here what the type of penalty must be, but the minimum penalty, of course, in squash is a conduct warning. So, unacceptable behaviour includes, and again a catch-all, but is not limited to, unacceptable behaviour includes audible or visible obscenity. So, cursing and swearing on the court isn't on, or making rude gestures. Verbal, physical, or any other form of abuse, well, that's easy enough. One player given out to or physically abusing another player, obviously that's unacceptable. Unnecessary physical contact, which includes pushing off the opponent. That would also include barging, of course. Dangerous play, including an excessive racket swing. It's worth remembering in the game of squash that when you are making that swing, typically the elbow is bent, so that really if you straighten your elbow, if you have a straight arm, in other words, when you're following through on the serve, the odds are that in your backhand, that serve is going to be dangerous. Check that with your coach. Dissent to an official. That's being cranky with a decision. Abuse of equipment, that's throwing the racket or banging it off the wall. Abuse of equipment or court. Unfair warm-up. We mentioned that in an earlier rule where the rules of squash say that the warm-up must be fair, so that it isn't appropriate for a player to be hitting the ball back to themselves 7 or 8 or 10 times. You would apply the conduct rule there, if necessary. Delaying playing, including being late back on court. League players take note. There's a 90-second interval between games, and if you're later than 90 seconds, the referee must penalise the player. So you should be getting a conduct warning at least. Deliberate distraction. We mentioned we met that in the distraction rule. And receiving coaching during play. Interestingly, it is the player on court who's penalised. You would at least give a conduct warning against the player for coaching being carried out during the match, and the referee would probably would insist that the coaching cease, and if the person on the balcony or wherever were to continue it, I suppose they'd really have to get them removed. So what are these penalties? Off with their head. A player guilty of an offence may be given a conduct warning or penalised with a conduct stroke, a conduct game, or a conduct match, depending on the severity of the offence. Being late back on court, a conduct warning is probably appropriate, or maybe smacking your racket off the wall in frustration. However, current guidelines would require that in the event of inaudible obscenity, for example, somebody shouting out the F word in frustration after playing a poor shot or having lost a rally, a conduct stroke is awarded against the player. The probability is that for any form of assault on the court, that it would be a conduct match. And maybe for repeated misconduct, it could be a conduct game. Presumably, but not necessarily, a conduct stroke would have been awarded earlier. The referee may impose more than one warning or more than one stroke to a player for a subsequent similar offence, provided any such penalty may not be less severe than the previous penalty for the same offence. So, if you've given a conduct stroke for inaudible obscenity, and this is repeated, the referee can give another conduct stroke, but they can't give a conduct warning. For constant repetition, the probability is that the referee is going to give a conduct game against them. It just 15.3 mentions that conduct during the warm-up and after the match is still subject to Rule 15. Then there's a series of what-ifs here. If the referee stops play to issue a conduct warning, a let is allowed. If a referee stops to play to award a conduct stroke, that conduct stroke becomes the result of that rally. Sensibly enough. If the referee awards a conduct stroke after a rally has finished, the result of the rally stands and the conduct stroke is added to the score with no change of service box. So I've just won a rally, and then my opponent is penalised with the conduct stroke against him. The result when I won the rally would have made me 7-6 ahead, and I'm now 8-6 ahead, and I serve from the same service box. If the referee awards a conduct game, that game is always the one in progress. But if this conduct game has been awarded during an interval, that additional conduct game is added to the score, but you don't get the additional 90 seconds. If a conduct game or match is awarded against an opponent or against a player, the offending player retains all points or games already won. So if it's 2-all and player A has a match awarded against him, the score will be 3-2. And the player A, against whom the match was awarded, will retain the 2 games and whatever effect that has on the overall score in the event that it was maybe a team tournament, for example. When a conduct penalty has been imposed, the referee must complete any required documentation. In your standard tournament, the odds are that there isn't any required documentation, but there certainly is in the professional game, where if you've awarded conduct strokes or games or matches, that has to be included in your report. That brings us to the end of the rules, and the remaining slides refer to stuff met earlier: markers calls and referee calls. The requirement for the recommendation that all players wear eye guards, but the rule that all junior players and all players in double squash must wear eye guards. And you've got there your 15 rules, and we've now come to a conclusion. So thank you for your attention, and we'll talk again sometime. Bye-bye.